Presentation. Good morning, everyone.
Full screen. You want to go into presentation?
What's that? Is disappear?
So it should be in full screen.
It is in full screen, but how do I make this little thing disappear? Yeah? There's a way of hide.
Hide, but then also while and play presentation.
Okay.
No.
Now it's complete. Okay. Thank you for this very kind introduction and for this. Please thank the artist on my behalf. I'll use it as my new image. And thank you for coming this morning to listen to a talk about ethics. Well, let me start with a little introduction to the talk. So in 2019, it looks like a long time ago, this was before the pandemic, there was the Cambridge Analytica scandal, Facebook leakage of information. A lot of discussions on various bulletin boards, forums in Silicon Valley. And somehow I came across this quote from Y Combinator News, F ... ethics and morality. We Facebookers love to brag about our paycheck size. So if this is how you feel, you probably came to the wrong talk, but don't leave. I hope to change your mind. Now, I have to admit that the title of the talk, How to be Ethical Computer Scientist, is a bit of a clickbait. I'm not really going to tell you how to be an ethical computer scientist. This is not a manual. This is a conversation. I will try to tell you what I think, what does it mean to be ethical computer scientist, and not how to be, because you can be ethical, you can pursue ethics. If I can quote JFK, we pursue ethics not because it is easy, because it is hard. And if I succeed, my success will be that I inspire some reflection, and you will think somewhat differently about many issues that are facing us today. And I want to distinguish the ethics that I'm talking about from the standard professional ethics. So there was a panel at RISE just a few months ago on ethical decision, the engineer responsibility, and you have the Dean of Engineering and people from the industry, one including Exxon. And there is a summary of ethics, professional ethics was do not cheat, lie, or steal. And of course, I agree with them. You should not cheat, lie, or steal. But at the end, when they have Q&A, I said, Exxon was aware of climate change as early as 1977, 11 years before it became public issue. What's your view on the ethics of that? And the panelists from Exxon said, I cannot comment on that. And kind of the audience pretty much gasped, because it shows the hollowness. If you reduce your ethics, you should not cheat, lie, or steal. So I will talk about different kind of ethics, much broader and much deeper, I hope. And I'm going to ignore, in fact, violate kind of what has been almost a principle in academia that goes back to the origin of the research university, which is the German research university was invented in the 19th century. And then around the world, this model was copied. And Max Weber was considered one of the father figure, founding figure in sociology. His philosophy was the austere duty of the scholar is preserve objectivity by distinguishing between facts and values, and by refusing to make in his capacity as a scholar judgment about values. I'm going to violently violate it. This talk will be personal and political and opinionated. And that means that, again, what I'm hoping to do is to trigger conversation. In the final caveat, I'm not a moral philosopher. I'm a concerned computer scientist. So some years ago, I visited Maria Klawe, who is the president of Harvey Mudd. And on the wall of her office, I see this sign, don't be a jerk. And it's kind of a bit surprising. You go to president's office, and on the wall it says, don't be a jerk. So I said, Maria, why is it here? She said, I'm the most powerful person in this institution. My decision can have deep impact on people's lives, but sometimes they are not going to tell me even about it because they will be afraid to tell me. So I need a constant reminder to myself, don't be a jerk, think about other people too. So when I want to talk about ethics, I want to go back to the beginning. So I grew up on a kibbutz in Israel. You see here a picture. It's a very beautiful, idyllic place to grow up. At age 10, I was given 10 volumes of called The Young Technologist, which I read cover to cover multiple times. And that's really made my decision to go to science. And I'm coming from a rabbinical family, and I've abandoned that route. But my wife used to say, you can take the boy out of the synagogue, but you cannot take the synagogue out of the boy. So let's go back to the synagogue. Come with me back to my synagogue. So it's age 13, I celebrated my Bar Mitzvah, where it's a passing of age for young Jewish boys. And one of the things you're supposed to do is to read a portion from the 5 books. And the portion is depending on the date. It's not something you choose. So this is what I had to read. This is from the book of Numbers, chapter 19. This is the ordinance of the law, which the Lord has commanded, saying, speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring thee a red heifer without spot, wherein there is no blemish, and upon which never came yoke. And ye shall give her unto Elazar the priest, that he may bring her forth without the camp, and one shall slay her before his face. And Elazar the priest shall take of her blood with his finger, and sprinkle of her blood directly before the tabernacle of the congregation 7 times. And one shall burn the heifer in his side, her skin, and her flesh, and her blood, with her dung shall he burn. This did not resonate with me. I did not find it uplifting at all, especially the part about the dung. But they were part, even at age 13, they were part of the Pentateuch that did resonate with me. You shall not mistreat a stranger, nor shall you oppress him, for you are a stranger in the land of Egypt. One law shall be to him that is homegrown, and honor the stranger that sojourneth among you. Shall not oppress any widow or orphan. If you oppress him, if he cries out to me, I will surely hear his cry. It did resonate with me. So if you read the 5 books, as I've done many, many times, given where I was growing up, you see a huge gap between this burning, dung, blood, and this kind of ethics. So what's going on here? And so this has been, biblical scholarship started in the 19th century in Germany, and they realized that there are really very, very different parts of the Bible, and there are many layers. And there are inherent contradictions inside the Bible. And one of them was highlighted by a Jewish writer, Asher Ginsberg, about 100 years ago, and he called it the priest and the prophet. And you see the tension between them. So on one hand, you read about the red heifer, and here is what Amos says. Though you offer me burnt offering and your meat offerings, I will not accept them. Neither will I regard the peace offering of your fat beast. Take away from me the noise of thy songs, for I will not hear the melody of thy viols, but let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. This was favorite quote of Martin Luther King Jr. Let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream. So the traditional way we think of third we have the 5 books, and then we have Joshua and Samuel and Kings and the prophets. So we think the prophets come after the 5 books. So it seems, are the prophets rebelling against it? But that's because the editor of the Bible wrote books in a particular order. But scholarship today think they were pretty much written in about the same time. Somewhere between, not in one given, over half a millennium, practically. And there is these different layers reflect a deep tension in the Bible that goes back to the very roots of Judaism, between morals versus rituals. And when you talk about judgment and justice, it's about morals. When you talk about the dung, it's about rituals. But the Jews did not invent morals. If we want to know what is the first codification of morals, you go 1,000 years earlier, and you find Hammurabi's Code, written about 18th century BCE. So this is almost 1,000 years before the Bible is written. And in the prologue, Hammurabi writes, Anu and Bel, these are gods, called by name me, Hammurabi, the exalted prince who feared God, to bring about the rule of righteousness to the land, to destroy the wicked and evil doers, so that the strong should not harm the weak, to further the well-being of humankind. So you see the same thing of the strong and the weak, and the well-being of mankind, almost 1,000 years earlier. And this will be I will develop the theme of the well-being of humankind. So take this phrase, the judgment run down as waters and righteousness as a mighty stream. And one way I read it is stand up for the weak. And I'm going to tell you about two incidents where I stood up for the weak. And I want to be clear. I'm not telling you to this to brag. Here, look at me. I want hopefully to inspire you. And even more importantly, I hope to inspire myself to do more of this. So the first incident happened a long time ago in IBM Almaden. Ashok Chandra, who at the time was a well-known computer scientist, was hired as I was department manager in 1899. Ashok Chandra 2 years later came as my manager, director of computer science, and Thomas Feder was hired the same year as a research staff member. And in IBM Research, after 1 year after you're hired, you gave a talk to all the senior managers that was called the first year review. How well are you doing here? And Thomas Feder gave a talk about concern satisfaction. And after his talk, I have a meeting with my manager, Ashok Chandra, and he tells me, tell Thomas that he failed the review, which is very unusual. Tell people you failed the review. I thought that the work was very good. Indeed, in 2018, that work has won the Church Award. But this was, of course, many years later. I did not know it at the time, but I thought the work was very good. And I told Ashok, there's no way I can tell him he failed the review when I think that this is outstanding work. And I said, I cannot do that. Now remember, this is IBM, this is not academia. I said, I cannot do that. At that point, Ashok could have told me, well, you do it as a manager. You have to tell him to do that. But so he could have removed me from management. But that would become kind of a scandal, and he was smart enough to not to avoid it. So he said, okay, it's your job to manage him, you do it. And we kind of de-escalated. Then we'll jump forward, and I'm now at Rice University. And across the street from Rice, we have a Texas Medical Center, the largest medical center in the world. And we have the Baylor College of Medicine, which is the top medical school. And long story, they found themselves in a financial dire straits. And they thought that Rice can bail them out because Rice is famous for having a relatively very large endowment for a small school. And the Rice president decided this is a good idea because he will suddenly become bigger and more famous. And so he liked the idea. And he formed a faculty advisory committee, and I was asked to join the faculty advisory committee. So I said, well, this is an incredibly weighty matter, and the president wants my advice. So, of course, I said yes. But then after a few meetings, I realized that this was called the theater of consultation. That there is a committee there to say I consulted with the faculty, but he couldn't care less about our opinion. And that led to all kinds of maneuvering, but eventually I managed to convince the faculty senate to appoint an independent faculty merger review committee that will have an independent opinion. The president said, okay, then I'm going to appoint my own committee. So he chose a bunch of administrators. There was two committees now studying the worthiness of this idea. And then throughout 2009, there is the battle of the committees. The faculty issues a negative report. The president's committee, of course, issues a glowingly positive report. This became very public dispute. I mean, the student newspaper want the president and me to write opposing op-eds about the merit of the review. This went even to the Houston Chronicle, the local newspaper. I gave a public talk. Probably the talk that I had most views ever was the whole maybe less than the sum of the parts. You can find on YouTube of my thoughts about the merger. And then by January 2010, Rice terminated the negotiation, never said why. But the answer was because it was really not a good idea. And my contribution was just to shine a bright light on a bad idea. And all of this was, you can find on my webpage. So again, I thought that in this case, the president was the powerful, and the faculty, the president I essentially to silence the faculty on the matter. So I stood up for the faculty. So this is just some of my view of what has been to be ethical is stand up for the weak. But I want to talk more about computing now. So far, there was not about computing. Let's talk about computing. So the World Economic Forum just came with a report of the They interviewed many, many people. They came up with some assessment of the biggest risk facing today humanity within the next 2 years, the next 10 years. And most of them are about the environment. I think we all have to agree that the biggest crisis now facing us is about the environment. But two of them, one is erosion of social cohesion and societal polarization. And I will argue that this relates to us. The other one is even more clearly, it's about cyber insecurity. I will not talk about cyber insecurity today, but I will talk about social cohesion and polarization. So let's talk about the last decade roughly from ACM point of view. I've been very involved with ACM over the past many years. So about a decade ago, we celebrated the Turing centenary. It was 100 years for Turing's birth. And if you go and you look at the program, it's all about, look at us, we're doing so well, we're doing so great. Then 2015, 5 years later, another celebration, 50 years for the Turing Award. Again, look at us, we're doing so great, we're doing so well. Then in June of last year, there was ACM at 75. ACM celebrated its 75th birthday. Now it's a very, very different one. You look at the program, what is it about? Here's the description. The panelists will imagine what might be next for technology and society in years to come. Suddenly we talk about society, and it's mostly about dealing with adverse impacts of society, of technology, computing on society. And one of the participants, very well-known computer scientist, wrote on Facebook, I found the whole thing a little depressing. Well, we're not celebrating. We used to celebrate. Suddenly we are talking about adverse impacts. But you cannot dissociate this focus on computing, what was happening around that time. Look at the date, June 10th of 2022. A day before that, the House of Representatives started the public congressional hearings about the January 6th insurrection, where ultimately we learned the President of the United States tried to subvert the legitimate transfer of power of the Republic. So that happened one day before. And 2 weeks before that, there was the massacre in Uvalde, Texas, where a young gunman killed 21 people, 2 teachers and 19 students. And this hit me very hard personally. One reason, it was also in Texas, just and there was something about the name. People say Uvalde, almost looked to me like saying, you Vardi. I took it very personally. But these 2 events reveal deep chasm in American society. You go in July 2022 poll, New York Times poll about Trump. 92% of the Democrats think he's threatening U.S. democracy. 76% of Republicans think that he exercised his right to contest the election. Then attitude about guns. This is about banning the sale of what's called AR-15 assault weapons, banning assault weapons. Among gun owners, among Democratic gun owners, 84% support such a ban on assault weapons. Among Republican gun owners, 75% are opposed. Depolarization. And depolarization threatens democracy, because democracy requires some cooperation between the two sides. You have to reach agreement on certain things. There has to be some element of trust. And people don't talk enough about trust, but trust is the bedrock on which we build institutions. George Shultz, who used to be Secretary of State of the United States, a month before he passed away at age 100, wrote a column in the New York Times, an op-ed in the New York Times about trust. He wrote, when trust was in the room, good things happen. When trust was not in the room, good things did not happen. Everything else is details. And this is also true. When you have a country where the two sides now, it's not well, we can agree to disagree, we have a difference of opinion, it's us and them, democracy breaks down. And people are talking about the United States. Really, there are serious publications talk about this United States. Can the United States break into blue and red and blue, the Confederacy? Serious articles. People are worrying about violence. The United States is Robert Kagan. The US is heading into a greater political and constitutional crisis in a civil war, with a reasonable chance over the next 3 to 4 years of incidents of mass violence, breakdown of federal authority, and the division of a country into warring red and blue enclaves. Next year, we're going to have presidential elections. I'm afraid. I'm very afraid. In Texas, this almost sounds like a joke, but in Texas, I mean, I had to check it when I read it first. I said, this cannot be true. But in June 2022, last year, the Republican Party of Texas added a plan to its platform saying that there should be a referendum in Texas, whether or not to leave the United States. Texas used to be independent states for about republic for about 9 years before they joined the United States. And now the Republican Party of Texas thinking maybe it was a mistake. Well, they tried to leave once in the Civil War, but now they're again thinking about it. It's called Texit. And there are people say the government is corrupt. Somehow we've maligned the government. The government has become, instead of the government is us, imperfect, but it's us because we're imperfect. Our government is very imperfect. Instead, the government is people talk about the weaponization of the government. The government is the enemy. And if the government is the enemy, it's legitimate to bear arms against the enemy. So I think historians will spend the next 50 years trying to write an analysis. What happened to this country? Who broke this country? What went wrong? But we don't have 50 years. I think we need some answers now. And I will try to offer some answers. And again, these are not definitive answers, and I only have 1 hour, so I cannot give you, there are many, many things, but I'll focus on 2, I think, very important trends, and we are part of it. We, I mean computing. So let's go back to 1981. And 3 very, very important things happened in this country in 1981. Number 1, I arrived as a postdoc at Stanford University. A bit more significant, a month before that, IBM introduced the IBM PC. And maybe even more important, equally important, in the beginning of that year, Ronald Reagan became president. And these the last 2 bullets issued, of course, they were in some sense epochal events. Because the PC went on to become a massive success. Now from hobbyist machine that was before that, it became a business machine. So the impact was so large that within about a year, but January of 1983, Time magazine has usually the person of the year, and it chose to put the PC. Okay, the main point of this picture is not the man, but the PC is on the desk now. The machine moves in. You see, this is the subtitle, the machine of the year instead of the person of the year. And indeed, if we think now, this event unleashed a tsunami of technology. The world that we live in today, you can say, the introduction of the PC was what thing got started. Because by the mid-80s, every knowledge worker had a computer on their desk. It's become standard equipment. If you're a knowledge worker, you have a computer on your desk. But the late 80s, you took one home. The World Web introduced in 1989. And by 1995, NSF decided to take a government network and commercialize it, open it up. And then Google was launched, Facebook was launched, the iPhone was introduced. So the world we live in today started with introduction of the machine of the year and went on from there. But during exactly the same time, we also had a tsunami of neoliberalism, because there was a revolution that Reagan here and Thatcher a couple of years before that started in the UK, which is neoliberalism is extreme free market capitalism. Some people call it market fundamentalism. But it's basically economic liberalization, reduction in government spending, privatization, deregulation, monetarism, tax education, tax reduction, globalization, free trade, a whole bunch of things that really changed very dramatically the direction of the economy. In 2006, Warren Buffett says there is a class warfare, all right, but it's my class, the rich class, that's making war and we're winning. It's Warren Buffett. This is not some bleeding heart liberal. And why is he talking about the class war and why you talk about we are winning? So let's look at some economic data. So we all hear about the decline of manufacturing. And we think because all manufacturing went to China and Mexico. But if you look at volume of manufacturing, it did not go down. Manufacturing changed its nature. It went from, we don't make sneakers. We don't make t-shirt was not made in the United States. None of you is wearing clothes went in the United States because these are low margin. Clothing is a low margin industry. Require cheap labor. We don't do it here. So this went to other countries. We went to high margin industries, capital intensive, where you can apply automation. It's very hard to automate making shirts, but making cars much easier to automate. So you can see here that employment peaked around 1980 and it's gone down significantly. We lost many millions of jobs in manufacturing. Manufacturing jobs used to be very good jobs because they paid about $50,000 a year. So this middle class income. This is in mostly, you don't see manufacturing plants in big cities. You see them in small towns in rural America. So the world that we live in, we don't see the impact. But rural Americas were very, very hardly hit because every manufacturing job supported not just their family, but these people went shopping, they went to a restaurant. So when any manufacturer, the estimate is for any manufacturer lost, about 3 other people in the community lost their jobs. And if you look on a bigger way, macroeconomics, there are kind of 4 important numbers: labor productivity, GDP, job generated, and income. So if you look here from 1953 roughly to 1983, these 4 numbers kind of go together. So productivity increases, everybody benefits. The economy grows, jobs are generated, income is rising, everybody feels good. But what do we see here? We're seeing decoupling. The productivity can grow and the GDP grows, but it doesn't trickle down to everybody. We are generating fewer jobs and income is stagnating. And here is a dramatic way to see that. This compares the top 1%, and go down to Wall Street. These are the top 1%ers, and the bottom 50%. They're probably not the people here, but these are the people who providing much of. I start thinking about these people when I start working from home in March 2020. I realized that my whole existence depending on these people providing everything that I need to do just to be able to work from home. So you see, in 1962, the top 1% earn about 13% of the income, and the bottom 50% earn about 20% of the income. You go to 2016, this number have flipped. The bottom 50 are making only about 13%, and the top 1% are making about 20% of the income. So we've seen shifting of income from the bottom half to the very top 1%. And when you zoom in a little more and you look at what's the impact on labor, so economists divide the whole labor pie into low skill, middle skill, and high skill jobs. And what you see here in 1983, that there was a slice of low skill jobs and a slightly larger slice of high skill jobs, and the rest were middle skill jobs. As time goes along, you go 30 years, and the low skill piece of the pie stayed about the same. We still need people to clean up the tables and serve us in restaurants. And you can automate it, but it's going to be incredibly difficult. If any robot is here, think of a robot to clean table in a restaurant. We don't have the technology to do it yet. And you're paying people minimum wage to do it, even below minimum wage. So why should we automate it? Middle skill, high skill is increased. We need more and more people with high skills. But middle skill has shrunk. Okay, so we went from almost 60% of middle skill jobs to 45%. What happened to these people? They're not happy. You can tell them, okay, you lost your job in manufacturing, go to work in Walmart, for example. That's 50%. They lost 50% of their income when they go to work for Walmart. They went from $25 an hour to $13 an hour. And indeed, we're seeing that the education benefit is increasing over the years. So you see here that if you look at men or women with graduate degree, their income has gone up. This is, we're talking about what's called real income after factoring inflation into the picture. But if you are without college education, only high school or less, then you have barely kept ground, or even you may have lost ground. In particular, you see that men have lost ground. Women have been more adaptable in this economy. And there's a whole story we can talk just about what happened to working class men in this economy. Now, this has been so stark when you look at the data that in July of last year, the New York Times asked its columnists to write a column what there was something they were wrong about. David Brooks is one of the more conservative columnists of the New York Times, and his column was, I was wrong about capitalism. And he wrote, the most educated Americans were amassing more and more wealth, dominating the best living areas, pouring advantages into their kids. A highly equal caste system was forming. And we can see it when you just look at this picture, you see that our world is doing well, and the people we don't even talk to, they're not doing well at all. Another column from September last year trying to understand why did so many people believe the big lie, so to speak? Why did people believe Trump? And he argued that underlying this is a sense of loss. And you can look at Democratic voting areas and Republican voting area, and you see a gap in income between these two areas. So Republican voting areas have actually lost income. But if you tell them, well, you lost because of automation, then that's very abstract. It's very hard to fathom. If you say you lost because of the Chinese, now you're talking about people who are not here and they look differently than you. It's much easier to think it was stolen from me than it was lost due to some global technological trend. Now into this economic polarization that I've talked about, now we come to see cognitive polarization. So this start again, it goes back to Reagan. So it used to be that there was something called the fairness doctrine. And we had the broadcaster had to use the spectrum, so the use of public resource. And part of the use of public resource was the fairness doctrine. They have to represent all point of view in a balanced way. So you can choose between CBS or ABC or NBC, and it really would be which anchor person did you like best. But essentially, they will all report the same news, and they have to be balanced. But then technology enabled cable TV, and then the FCC said, we don't need this, we don't need fairness anymore because there are just enough point of views. If you don't like Fox News, go to MSNBC, you could flip. Our answer is people don't flip channels. They stay on one channel, that's what they watch. And gradually they live in different cognitive bubbles. Now, this was even before the internet. Now, let's see what the internet did to this cognitive polarization. So you go back to the roots of the internet, the culture of the internet. When I mean the internet, I just don't mean TCP/IP. I mean the whole ecosystem we call the internet, the communication network, the application, we call today the internet. So when I came to Stanford, as you remember, in 1981, there was at the time it was ARPANET, not internet yet. It was ARPANET, and then it became CSNet. But the roots, the cultural root already existed. There was something called the WELL, which was a dial-up bulletin board, lots of discussions. There was Usenet, Unix to Unix network. And the culture at the time was anti-establishment because it came after the Vietnam War. So out of this anti-establishment mentality came out the mantra, information wants to be free. Information is beats. It doesn't want anything. It does not have wants or needs. But people say information should be free. These are I call it the hippies view. And in fact, when Tim Berners-Lee introduces the World Wide Web in 1989, his motto was unfettered public churn of information. And the early days were exhilarating because information that was just always difficult. You have to go to library. You know, when I was looking for information about the University of the United States, it was very difficult to find. You had to go to the U.S. Embassy at an academic library where you could read about different universities. And suddenly everything was available on the web. But within a couple of years, we realized, wait a minute, there is just TMI. There's so much information, nobody can deal with it. How do we find good information? And then Yahoo was the cutting edge company at the time. And they said, well, how do you find books in the library? You have a catalog. We will be the catalog for the internet. But the internet grew way, way faster than the libraries. So it didn't scale. So search engines were invented. The early ones were bad. Young people don't remember, Lycos, Alta Vista. But then Google came. For many years, Google had no competition. Now suddenly Google has competition. Bing is suddenly back on the table. But they had an issue, which also Bing will face the same issue now. How do you monetize it? It's not enough to have a good search engine. How do you make money? It's a business. How do you make money? And again, remember, information wants to be free. So you can charge for research. So they came up with a brilliant idea, advertising. Seemed a very innocent idea. Newspapers, television work on advertising. Let's have advertising fund businesses like Google. But they quickly discovered that online advertising is different than TV or newspaper advertising. On newspaper, you can do, if you really want to catch your attention, do a whole page advertisement on the newspaper. People tried it with big banners on the internet. People hated it. They did not want to see that somehow there was psychologically it was the same. I have limited screen space. Do not clutter it with big banners of advertising. And so how do you make sure that people look at advertisement? So another brilliant idea came, micro-targeted advertising. We will show the advertisement that you might be interested in. Well, for that, we need data. So we need to go and collect your data. And that means you're seeing different things. Each one of us sees different things. So we took the cognitive bubble that already exists because of cable TV, you take it to the next level now. And this led to what's become known as the surveillance capitalism. So businesses whose business model is surveillance, gather data on us that we provide for free, and they then in turn around go sell it to the advertisers. Shoshana Zuboff, who wrote this book in 2019, but if you don't want to read the 700 pages book, you can read an article after the January 6th insurrection. She wrote the coup we are not talking about. And she wrote, we can have democracy or we can have surveillance society, but we cannot have both. And of course, this is all based on as if we don't care about privacy. So indeed, that's what you hear from Silicon Valley. If you have something you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. We said it, Eric Schmidt, 2009. But in 2005, Eric Schmidt threw a hissy fit because reporters from CNET wanted to see how much personal information can you find using just a Google search engine. And they said, whom should we choose to pick on? How about Eric Schmidt? And they found lots of personal information available publicly, and they published. Here is what we found. And he threw a hissy fit. And he says, you know, we're not going, nobody in Google is going to talk to CNET. And they boycotted CNET for a couple of years. Or the age of privacy is over. Who said it? Of course, Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg buys a house in Palo Alto. So he said, you know what, I might as well buy the whole neighborhood. Could I get a bit more privacy this way? So privacy is dead for you guys, not for, we are important, we are rich, we need privacy. You guys, you are little people, you don't need privacy. And Facebook took this idea from Google of personally adjusted advertising, micro-target advertising, and took it to nano targeting. And now it's not just about advertisement, it goes back to the very content that you see. What you see on Facebook, what I see on Facebook is different. Not because we have different set of friends. Even with the same set of friends, we will see different things because Facebook thinks we want you to stay, so we will show you only stuff that you want to see, keep you engaged. And this even led to something people call addiction by design. You know, design the whole interface is designed to make you stay on it longer and longer because there's more chance you'll see advertisements and you'll click on advertisements, and that's how they make money. And people have studied this, and they basically say that we all crave social approval, and we all get it in small dosage. Like people like to see how many likes you take. Oh, I put this picture. I put this picture that the cartoon. How many likes am I going to get on this picture? So we all get some ego boosting from this. Last year, a reporter for The Atlantic tried to understand what's happening in this country. And his metaphor was, it's like Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel is a biblical story, how humanity tried to build a tower all the way to heaven. And God said, no, this is not a good idea. Heaven is mine. You guys stay down there. So he could have just thrown a lightning bolt and destroyed the tower, but God was a bit more clever. And he says, how about you all speak different languages? And Haidt said, this is what happened to the United States. The story of Babel is the best metaphor I have found for what happened in America in 2010s and for the fractured country we now inhabit. Something went terribly wrong, very suddenly. We are disoriented, unable to speak the same language, recognize the same truth. We're cut off from one another and from the past. Some people talk about the truth crisis. We cannot even agree what is the truth. So I give all this introduction because if we want to be ethical computer scientists or data scientists, first, admit that you have a problem. And I think it means first we have to accept responsibility. We did that. And by that doesn't mean you personally did that, but we collectively, we have enabled it. We did that. And it's the money of a book that I read in the mid-80s. I mean, my son was a teenager, was how to talk to. So I said, I'll read his books. I can talk to him about his books. So this was the book that he read. So I said, I'll read it too. It was called Ender's Game. It was a popular book at the time. And the story, spoiler alert, the story is that there are a bunch of teenagers and they think they're playing video games. They don't know they're really fighting intergalactic war. And when they win the game, they have destroyed the whole planet. This is us. We thought we are the Rebel Alliance. We are the people who start startups in garages. I have news for you guys. We are now the empire. We are the Death Star. So we had a lot of talk about responsible AI and responsible corporations. But at the end of the day, AI is developed by people. And corporations are run by people. So if we talk about ethics, it has to be about people. And there's a whole talk that I can give about ethics versus public policy. And we should not confuse the two things. Very important, piece of history, but had some analogy with the dealing today. In 1906, Upton Sinclair wrote The Jungle. It's about the meat packing industry in the United States. And when he told people what is really happening in meat packing plants, it was so horrifying that finally it led to the Federal Meat Inspection Act of 1906. Because people said, if these are the conditions he's telling us, we don't want to eat this meat. So this basically saved the industry. So establish standards so people will feel safer about the meat they're eating. So my view is, if we want to talk about responsible corporations, it's about public policy. It's about rules and regulation. But if we want to influence people, talk about ethics. So ACM does care about ethics, and there is ACM Code of Ethics. And let's read the first paragraph. Computing professionals change the world. Computing professional actions change the world. To act responsibly, they should reflect upon the wider impact of their work, consistently supporting the public good. Remember who was the first to talk about public good? Hammurabi. Now we're back to support the public good. So if you want to be ethical, computer scientist, data scientist, MBA, think about the public good, not just what's good for me, what's good for society. And this is a quote from a Rice student. We had a poll in a class, ethics class, with a poll of would people get and take an offer from Facebook. And 2/3 said yes, 1/3 said no. I asked one of the yeses to explain. Somebody stepped up and said, yeah, ethic issue, but good job, interesting job, good pay. So I'll take the job, good colleagues, smart colleagues. One student say yes, say no. I ask him why. Again, I asked for volunteer to say why. The vote was anonymous. He said, I will have a bachelor in computer science from Rice University. I will have many jobs, offers. Why do you need to take the ethically questionable one? I'll take the one that I feel good about. So we are actually in advantage. We can choose. People say, oh, I don't have a choice. No, you have a choice. Now, when I start talking about the public good, people say, oh, you practically Marxist-Leninist. So my response was, let's read the first paragraph of the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide a common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our prosperity, do ordain and establish a constitution of the United States of America. So the goal of the Constitution is to promote the public good. The rest is the mechanism by which we collectively, we have different opinions about the public good, how collectively we agree what is the public good and how to promote the public good. But the idea of promoting the public good is the most important part to me of the Constitution, is the joint responsibility that we have to the public good. Now, of course, it's not going to always be black and white. Even take something that we think is black and white. Thou shalt not kill. Black and white, really? What about self-defense? What about just war? Different opinions about the death penalty. So we all agree that human life is sacred, but it's a more nuanced view. So the same thing, we'll have big debates about the public good. But sometimes I think some portion of the industry, I think it's almost black and white. So in 2019, Jacobin magazine published an article about Uber. It said, from the start, Uber business model has been based on habitual criminality and shocking indifference to human life. Now, this is a very left-wing magazine, so many people kind of ignored it. But last year, there was a massive, a whistleblower that leaked over 100,000 documents, and the Guardian analyzed them. And it turns out Jacobin was on the mark, exactly right. This, how Uber behaved, was exactly habitual criminality and shocking indifference to human life. So, should you work for, I'm not hesitant to tell people, should you work for Google or not? This is the question. You have to decide for yourself. But I'll tell you one thing, do not work for Uber. Now let's talk about us. We are educators here. So my claim is, if we are educating students who do not come out once they have the degree with a social responsibility awareness, then we are not serving the public good. So it is our social responsibility to impart a sense of social responsibility to students. And this must be a part of CS, data science, what have you. We must talk to the students about this. Again, we can't give them a recipe, but we have to raise the awareness in them that they are responsible. And I want to give you a pointer to an article that I wrote with my younger colleague, Rodrigo Ferreira, was in 60 a couple of years ago, Deep Tech Ethics. We talk about how we do some of this awareness raising in a teaching ethic to computer students at Rice University. And in some sense, I said teaching this class can be very moving experience because there's no exam in the class. The final thing is they have to write an essay about their own social responsibility. And reading this essay is just moving. I mean, here is something from a student wrote. I believe there was no problem that could not be solved by the all-powerful technology. It was only a matter of time before scientists devised the correct algorithm to solve all the problems of the world. Looking back, I realized how naive I was. And in closing, I want to go back to the synagogue because it turned out these issues, how to be ethical, these are not new issues. People were struggling with these issues 2,000 years ago. Going back to a Mishnah, it's a post-biblical Jewish literature. There is a book called Saying of Our Fathers, and the whole book is about how to be ethical. Hillel elder said, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? I need to take care of myself first. But if I'm only for myself, being only for myself, what am I? If not now, when? He said, you have to take responsibility to the, not just for yourself, but to the greater good. And talking about the greater good, Rabbi Tarfon said, the day is short and the work is plentiful. It's not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it. None of us can, the world is big. And you can say, oh, what can I do? This is beyond me. Go figure out something that you can do. You're not at liberty to neglect it. So ASIM Code of Ethics, again, going back, community professional action change the world. To act responsibly, they should reflect upon the wider impacts of their work. And I think we have neglected it. We say, I'm doing hashing algorithms. I'm doing this, I'm doing this. Let's look at the bigger impact, wider impact of our work. And again, you can go back to the Mishnah and find it. Alexander the Great in the 4th century BC comes to the Middle East, or goes all the way to Persia. And he conquers also the Holy Land. And he goes to the Jewish judges of the south and asks them, who is called a wise man? Wise person. They respond to him, the person who sees the consequence of his actions. So our action changes the world. We must reflect on the wider impact of our work. And we should consider, doctor take the Hippocratic oath. I would like to propose the Lovelacean oath. Why Ada Lovelace? Because this debate between essentially making money and the public good goes back to the very founding of computing. So we can go back to Ada Lovelace and Charles Babbage. What was Babbage's motivation? He wanted to start a company. He wanted to make money. And Ada Lovelace writes to him and says, it's okay with me that you make money, but I wish to add my mind towards expounding and interpreting the Almighty's laws and works for the most effective use of mankind, again, for the public good. So here is a proposal that I have for the Laplacian oath, I solemnly pledge always to reflect upon the wider impact of my work, consistently supporting the public good. And in closing, I want to mention a quote due to Edward Wilson, a well-known biologist, wrote about sociobiology, biology, and society. And he wrote the true problem, he died a couple of years ago, he wrote the true problem of humanity is the following: with Paleolithic emotions, evolution, medieval institutions, and technology of the gods. And I would paraphrase it: today's technology is taking advantage of our Paleolithic emotions and medieval institutions. So a couple of years ago, together with a group of colleagues from around the world, we launched the Vienna Manifesto on Digital Humanism, essentially arguing that we would like technology should serve society rather than the other way around. You can find it. There is a Digital Humanism Initiative. There are talks. There are things. Just Google or Bing now, Digital Humanism Initiative. See what happens. And the title of the slide is "Do not be driven by technology, drive it." And I'm stealing the slogan of BMW. BMW used to, their slogan was the ultimate driving machine. But now they're threatened by autonomous vehicles. So they said, don't be driven by technology, drive it. I think that's also appropriate for us. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take some questions. Yes.
Moshe, this is more a comment on the economy. It's not just America, of course, it's just